My name is Eleanor Whitman, and I am 71 years old. The night my own son threw my suitcase into the street and told me I was nothing but a burden. The rain did not stop. It fell hard, steady, as though the sky itself had turned against me. My slippers squished with every step, water creeping into the seams, and the sweater that had been warm 2 hours earlier clung to my skin like ice. David, my only son, the child I had raised through scraped knees. Schoolyard fights, late-night asthma attacks, stood in the doorway with his arms crossed. His face was cold, unblinking, almost rehearsed. He did not need to shout. The silence between us said it all. I had no place in his house anymore, no place in his life. I bent down to pick up the suitcase. It was soaked through before I even reached the sidewalk. Behind me, the door slammed shut, sharp and final. That sound stayed with me longer than I'd like to admit. I did not cry. Not that night. I just walked. The streets glistened under yellow lamps, and every passing car sent a spray of dirty water against my legs. People hurried past with umbrellas, their eyes sliding over me as though I were invisible. And maybe I was. Another old woman in a storm, another figure to avoid. When my legs finally gave out, I sank onto a low concrete wall beneath the overpass near the river. Trucks roared overhead, sending vibrations down the pillars. The ground was slick. The air smelled of wet asphalt and rust. And I pulled my thin blanket from the suitcase, wrapping it tight even though it was already damp. My bones shook anyway, partly from cold, mostly from disbelief. I had spent decades building a life, teaching children, guiding staff, balancing budgets for a school district that demanded more with less every single year. I had skipped meals so David could eat, taken extra shifts, sold the few pieces of jewelry my late husband had given me, every sacrifice, so he might have more. And now, in his eyes, I was not a mother. I was not even human. I was a weight. That word haunted me, burden. He had said it with such ease, like swatting a fly, as though the years I carried him meant nothing. The rain pounded harder. I listened to sirens in the distance, to the hiss of tires on wet pavement, to the hollow sound of something inside me breaking apart. I wondered if anyone would notice if I stayed under that bridge until morning. I wondered if anyone would care. Maybe some of you know that feeling, that moment when the people you love most look at you as if you are nothing, when every memory of kindness, of love, is erased by a single cruel act. That night, I was not Eleanor, not mother, not teacher, not widow. I was just discarded. It was past 3 a.m. when the rain finally softened, turning from a downpour to a mist. My eyelids grew heavy, but sleep would not come. Every sound felt like a threat, every shadow like a warning. I thought of calling someone, anyone, but I had no one left to call. And then I heard footsteps, slow, steady, measured, not rushed, not careless. I looked up, bracing myself. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming, because the face staring down at me through the dim glow of the streetlight was one I had not seen in years. It was my sister, Clara. Clara stood there in the rain like a ghost from another lifetime. Her trench coat was soaked, her hair plastered against her face, but her eyes sharp, determined cut through the storm. For a moment I could not move. We had not spoken properly in almost 15 years. Family disagreements, distance, pride, they had all built walls between us. Yet here she was, kneeling in front of me beneath an overpass at 3 a.m, her hand reaching for mine. She didn't ask questions. She didn't scold me for not calling. She simply brushed the wet strands of hair from my face and whispered, "Get up, Eleanor. You are coming with me." Her grip was firm but gentle as she lifted me to my feet. My knees buckled, but she held me steady, picked up my waterlogged suitcase, and guided me toward a silver sedan parked at the curb. Inside, the heater roared. She wrapped me in a thick wool blanket she had brought from the trunk and pressed a thermos into my hands. Honey and mint, my favorite. The warmth spread slowly through me, and for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt something close to safety. Clara drove in silence, her eyes fixed on the road, jaw set. I glanced at her in the dim glow of the dashboard. Same straight posture, same fierce concentration. She had always been fire where I was water. When people hurt her, she burned. I endured. I survived. But tonight, survival suddenly felt small. We reached a motel just off the highway in less than 20 minutes. Clara parked, slipped her arm around me, and walked me inside, like I was made of glass but still unbreakable. She had already reserved a room. The clerk handed her a key without a word. The room was plain, scratchy sheets, a humming air conditioner, beige walls, but to me, it felt like a palace. Clara placed clean clothes from a shopping bag on the bed, soft cotton pants, a blouse, socks that smelled of lavender detergent. She told me to shower. I obeyed without protest. Hot water cascaded over me, washing away the mud, the cold, the humiliation. I stood there until the steam blurred the mirror, until my skin burned pink, until I felt human again. When I stepped out, the clothes fit perfectly. Clara was sitting by the window, her phone charging on the table. She didn't look up when she spoke. "We're heading south to Madison tomorrow," she said. "I've made arrangements." I wanted to ask what she meant, but the exhaustion hit too hard. I crawled into the stiff bed and closed my eyes. Sleep came quickly, heavy and uneven, but real. In the morning, sunlight leaked through the thin curtains. Clara was already dressed, hair tied back, suitcase packed. She didn't ask how I slept. She didn't offer small talk. She just said, "Eat," sliding a bag of breakfast sandwiches across the table. And then, as I sipped the coffee she had brought, she pulled a folder from her bag and placed it in front of me. Her voice was steady. "That place is yours now. I bought it this morning." I opened the folder, and the world shifted. Inside the folder were glossy printouts of a real estate listing. A 2-bedroom condominium overlooking Lake Mendota in Madison. Photos of a balcony with iron railings. Sunlight spilling across a granite kitchen counter. A guest room with a writing desk facing the water. At the bottom, a bank receipt showed a wire transfer. Clara's name as sender. My name as recipient. $4.5 million. My breath caught. I read the numbers again, half convinced they would dissolve like ink in the rain. My hands shook as I traced the page. "Clara, what have you done?" She didn't flinch. What I should have done years ago. I wanted to protest, to tell her I couldn't accept it. But she raised a hand. Firm. No arguments. "That condo is yours. It's under your name. Free and clear. The money is yours too. I've been preparing for this since the day I left Milwaukee. I knew one day you might need me, even if you hated asking." I swallowed hard. Gratitude mixed with shame until I couldn't tell one from the other. The thought of security, of a home again, pressed against the years of being overlooked, silenced, discarded. I lowered my head. Clara's tone softened, but stayed sharp at the edges. "They took too much already. You're not giving them another chance." 2 days later, I stepped into that condo for the first time. The building was modest but elegant. Cream walls with blue tile roofs. A quiet, gated entrance with a guard who nodded politely as we drove in. The lobby smelled faintly of lemon polish and fresh carpet. Clara handed me the keys, then pushed the door open. Light poured in through sliding glass doors. Beige walls. Pale gray sofa. the hush of the lake outside. I walked straight to the balcony, gripping the railing. The water stretched wide, endless, alive. For the first time in weeks, my knees didn't feel hollow. Behind me, Clara set down my suitcase. This is where you live now. It'll be across the hall for as long as it takes. You're not alone. Eleanor. I turned, throat tight, unable to say thank you. She must have read it in my face because she nodded once. Brisk. Good. Then listen carefully. Angela will be here tomorrow. She's my friend from college. She's a lawyer. Ruthless. Precise. She'll set everything in place. Financial locks. Legal shields. Oversight on every account. Whatever David and Melissa try, she'll be 2 steps ahead. Angela arrived exactly at 10 the next morning. Tall. Severe. Black hair pinned tight. Glasses perched low. She shook my hand with a grip that left no room for weakness. You've been through hell, she said. That ends now. I'll make sure of it. Clara watched from the kitchen island, arms folded. Her eyes burned with the promise I had almost forgotten how to believe in protection. But even as the papers were spread across the counter, even as Angela explained every safeguard, a chill slid down my spine. Because deep inside I knew David and Melissa wouldn't stop. And I was right. Clara insisted on hosting a small welcome gathering in the condo's clubhouse 3 days after I moved in. Better to show you belong here, she said, not giving me the chance to decline. She bought me 2 new outfits and told me to wear the blue one, a long-sleeved dress that made me feel like myself again. The room glowed softly. Finger foods lined on white platters. The glass wall framing the lake as the sun dipped low. About a dozen residents mingled retired couples, widows, one man who reminded me faintly of my late husband. Their smiles were polite, warm without prying. For the first time in years, I felt like I might pass unnoticed in the best way. I lingered by the window, watching dusk swallow the water. Then the air shifted. Clara, standing across the room with a drink, tapped her glass for a short toast. She raised her glass high. Second chances are worth celebrating. Applause. A whistle. The hum of conversation returned. That's when the door opened. I saw them immediately. David in a pressed shirt. Melissa in beige and gold. Her heels clicking softly. They smiled like they belonged there. As if nothing had happened. As if I hadn't been left in the storm with only a soaked suitcase. My stomach clenched. Clara moved before I could. She crossed the room with a smile that never reached her eyes. I didn't hear her words, but I saw the wall she built with her posture. David tried to glance over her shoulder, catching my eye, smiling as though we were old friends. Melissa stayed silent, lips curved in a polished mask. Clara motioned to the staff. Within seconds, a concierge appeared. The exchange was brief, pointed. David and Melissa stood their ground for a moment longer, then turned and walked out. Melissa didn't even look back. The room shifted back to normal, though whispers rippled under the surface. No one asked me questions, and I was grateful. Clara returned to my side, picked a grape from the fruit tray, and said quietly, "Told you they'd come." Later that week, it happened again. This time in my own living room. David arrived first, carrying a leather briefcase. Melissa trailing behind with a tin of cookies wrapped in gold tissue. They spoke in bright tones about stopping by while they were in the neighborhood. Melissa set the tin on the table, hands folded neatly in her lap. Then David slid a stapled document across the table. Just something to make things smoother. Mom. In case of emergencies. So we can help. I looked down. 6 pages. Neat lettering. A title in bold. Family Wellness and Property Agreement. Buried in the middle. Angela had warned me to look for it temporary power authorization. Financial oversight clauses. The language was careful, subtle, but it would give David full access to act on my behalf. My hands did not shake. I set the pages down. Clara, sitting in the armchair nearby, rose silently and left the room. She returned with a second folder. Inside, the exact same document, this one with red marks and an email header. Her voice was calm. "This is the draft you sent last week to a paralegal in Madison. Word for word." David's face froze. Melissa's smile cracked. Clara nodded toward me. "Go ahead. Ask them what this is really for." I didn't ask. I simply picked up the contract and tore it down the middle. The rip echoed louder than any scream. David's eyes widened, not with anger, but with something I hadn't seen in years. Fear. After the torn contract incident, I expected David and Melissa to storm out of my life in fury. But I underestimated them. They didn't retreat. They changed shape. The very next evening, I opened my door to find David standing there with a paper bag from an Italian restaurant. He smiled softly, almost shy. "Thought you might not have eaten," he said. He tried to hand me the bag. I left the screen door closed. His smile faltered. After a few minutes of strained pleasantries, he set the bag on the bench outside and walked away. 2 days later, Melissa appeared. She carried a grocery sack and a book tucked under her arm. Her voice was lighter than usual, almost playful. She called me Mom, a word she hadn't used in years. "I just wanted to stop by. Maybe cook something for you, if you're tired." She lingered in the hallway, waiting for me to invite her in. I didn't. She left with the groceries, but slipped the book onto the bench. And so it went. A rotation. One would come bearing food, flowers, even an old framed photo of David as a boy, holding a fishing rod with me beside him on the pier. Each time, their tone carried guilt, remorse, softness. Each time, I said nothing. But I was not passive. Clara had given me a small recording device, no bigger than a car key. I left it on whenever they came. I wasn't capturing criminal confessions. I was collecting something more valuable: patterns. The way their voices always circled back to practical things. Bills. Accounts. "What if something happens to you? Don't you think we should be on file?" The language of caretakers wearing the clothes of thieves. Angela listened to the tapes with a blank face. She didn't even take notes at first, just stared at the wall, absorbing every detail. Then she flagged something chilling. "David tried to change your bank's mailing address," she said flatly. "He used an old phone number once tied to you. It hasn't gone through yet, but it's logged. That's identity manipulation." My stomach dropped. The next night, at 2 a.m, the fire alarm blared in our hallway. No smoke. No fire. Ramirez, the building guard, later reviewed the camera footage. A blurry figure in a jacket slipped through the service corridor 20 minutes earlier. The outline was unmistakable. David. Clara changed the locks on my mailbox the following day. Angela tightened the security alerts, setting notifications for every login attempt, every account access, every legal inquiry tied to my name. Yet, beneath the precautions, I felt the truth pressing in. This wasn't about reconciliation. This was about siege. They circled me like wolves who had once been fed at my table. And I, who had once endured in silence, now sat quietly, but not weakly. I was listening, recording, preparing. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "What they want is not family. It is control." And I underlined the word twice. The envelope arrived on a gray morning. No return address, no stamp, just slid under my door like a quiet threat. 6 pages, stapled, heavy in my hand. I unfolded it slowly. Legal language filled every line. Phrases about health and safety concerns, mental decline, erratic decisions. The petition requested a conservatorship review. David and Melissa claimed they feared for my well-being, that my financial choices were reckless, that I might endanger myself. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from fury. Me, Eleanor Whitman, who had balanced budgets for a school district through a recession, who had stretched pennies into meals when David was little, now labeled unstable, unfit. I laughed. Then I picked up the phone and called Clara. By noon, Angela sat at my kitchen counter, the petition already open on her laptop. Her expression was unreadable as she flipped through the pages. They copied half this language from online templates. She said finally, "Some of it isn't even valid under Wisconsin law. It's intimidation, not substance." Still, intimidation could ruin reputations if left unchallenged. I refused to be painted as a confused old woman. Book me an evaluation, I told Angela. 2 days later, I sat in a sterile clinic under bright lights, answering memory questions, reflex tests, puzzles on a screen, blood drawn, blood pressure checked, every number recorded. The doctor, calm and clinical, signed off with one line that made my chest ache with vindication. Excellent cognitive health. No impairments observed. I made 3 copies of the report. 1 for Angela, 1 for Clara, and 1 I mailed directly to David, with no note. The silence that followed was deafening. But Clara was not one to wait. She had already prepared the next move. "We're done reacting," she said one evening, her voice sharp. "It's time to build walls they cannot climb." That's when she revealed the plan. The Whitman Foundation, a nonprofit named after me. Its charter already drafted. Every major asset my condo, my accounts, even my name rights would be tied irrevocably to the foundation. Beneficiaries would be programs for retired teachers, scholarships for children of widows, community outreach for abused elders. Angela reviewed the documents carefully, then nodded. This isn't just protection. It's permanence. If they contest it, they're contesting charity. That's a battle they'll never win. I felt the ground shift under me again. But this time, it wasn't shame or fear. It was strength. I signed the papers with steady hands. Within a week, the foundation existed on paper and in law. My life's remnants, once vulnerable to greedy hands, were now sealed in a structure larger than me. Clara leaned back in her chair, satisfied. Now they'll have to go through more than you. They'll have to go through the law, the state, and the very people they've been pretending to care about. For the first time in months, I slept without waking at every sound. But deep down, I knew David and Melissa weren't finished. Wolves don't stop when the fence goes up. They dig under it, and I braced myself, because I knew the digging had already begun. It was Angela who discovered it first. She came to my condo one Tuesday morning, her expression sharper than usual, a folder pressed tight against her chest. She didn't even sit down before speaking. "They forged your signature, Eleanor." The words hung in the air like smoke. I stared at her, unblinking. "What do you mean?" Angela opened the folder. Inside were copies of documents recently filed at the county clerk's office. Power of attorney transfers, amendments to the Whitman Foundation charter, notarized pages that supposedly bore my name. The text claimed I had granted David and Melissa authority to alter the foundation structure. My name, written in ink. Only it wasn't mine. Angela's finger tapped the margin. The signatures are inconsistent. The PDF metadata is sloppy. One file was created at a cafe that's been closed for renovation for months. Another references a board member who resigned last spring. It's reckless, lazy, but dangerous. Clara paced the kitchen like a caged flame. "We've got them," This isn't just manipulation anymore. This is fraud. The very next day, Angela delivered the documents to a forensic examiner. The report came back within 48 hours. Inconclusive strokes, mismatched baselines, timestamp irregularities, clear evidence of forgery. And then came the bigger crack. Clara quietly arranged a meeting with the notary, whose name appeared on the filings. He didn't even remember me. He admitted had never witnessed such a document. His statement was notarized the following morning. A weapon in its own right. The case escalated overnight from a family dispute to a legal firestorm. Angela filed a motion for fraud and perjury. The county district attorney's office reached out, noting that attempting to defraud a registered nonprofit was not just civil, it could be criminal. The hearing was set for Thursday morning. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. All dark wood and cold air. A gavel resting like a threat on the judge's desk. I sat in the second row, Clara on one side, Angela on the other. Ahead of us, David and Melissa sat stiffly with their lawyer, their eyes never meeting mine. The judge reviewed the documents quietly, flipping page after page. Then came the testimonies. Angela laid everything out clean, factual, unshakable. The forensic report, the notary's denial, the timeline inconsistencies. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. The truth carried its own weight. When David's lawyer rose, his defense wavered. He claimed I had authorized things verbally, that I had memory issues, that the paperwork was misunderstood. But Angela was ready. She raised my recent cognitive exam, the one David himself had previously submitted, to prove I was capable when it suited him. His own argument folded against him. The judge's face remained unreadable, but the silence was damning. Finally, he leaned forward. The court finds the submitted documents invalid. The motion is dismissed. Evidence of forgery will be referred to the district attorney's office for review. The gavel struck. Sharp. Final. Outside, the sun blazed harshly against the courthouse steps. I stood still, letting it burn the crown of my head. "Mom," a voice said behind me. I turned. David stood alone, his face pale, his voice unsteady. "You're really doing this?" I met his eyes for the first time in months. "No, David," I said quietly. "You did this." And for the first time, I saw it, the slump of his shoulders, the crack in his certainty. He had crossed a line he could never uncross. The days after the hearing felt strangely quiet. No late-night knocks. No envelopes slid under my door. No sudden alarms. For the first time in months, I wasn't bracing for the next blow, but I wasn't naive. Silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it means retreat. Clara and Angela urged me to press forward, to fortify what we had built, together. We finalized the Whitman Foundation's charter. Every asset my condo, the savings, even the rights to my name, was now permanently bound to the foundation. The board was formed with teachers, social workers, and advocates. None of them family. All of them chosen for integrity. David sent nothing. No apology. No explanation. Instead, his lawyer delivered a signed settlement, releasing all claims to my estate. Melissa, I heard, had already left town. It ended the way these stories often do, not with confrontation, but with absence. And maybe that was for the best. I turned my focus to the foundation. Within weeks, we hosted our first event at the Madison Community Center. Folding chairs lined the hall, coffee brewed in giant urns. Nearly 100 faces filled the room. Retired teachers, widows raising grandchildren, women who had spent lifetimes giving everything only to be cast aside in their later years. I didn't prepare a speech. I simply spoke the truth. This organization is not about money. It is about dignity, about refusing to be erased. We may be older, but that does not mean we are powerless. Our second half of life can be just as strong as the first, maybe stronger, because now we know what we will no longer tolerate. The applause that followed was warm, not thunderous, but enough to steady the room. Enough to steady me. That evening, I walked home slowly, the lake glowing silver in the moonlight. I thought about the journey from rain-soaked concrete under a bridge to standing on a stage, speaking to women who saw themselves in me. At my condo, I clipped lavender from the balcony planter Clara had brought me. The scent filled the quiet space, soft and steady. I whispered to myself. Not for drama, but for clarity. I did not break. And I believed it. Because the truth is simple. Betrayal can bruise. Lies can wound. But silence does not mean weakness. Documentation is power. Memory is strength. And resilience builds legacy. That is my lesson. If you are watching this, tell me, what lesson do you take from my story? And from which city are you listening tonight? When I look back at everything I endured, from the night my son cast me out into the storm, to the courtroom where the truth finally spoke, I realized something important. Age does not erase our worth. Silence does not mean weakness. What saved me was not shouting louder than those who tried to erase me, but holding on to the truth, documenting every step, and refusing to vanish. Betrayal hurts most when it comes from family, but it also teaches the deepest lesson. You cannot control what others do, but you can decide how you will rise. I chose to build something greater than revenge. I built a foundation, a shield, and a legacy, and I stand taller for it. Now I want to ask you, what lesson do you take from my story, and from which city are you watching today?